Today I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the First Peoples, traditional custodians of the lands and waterways, the Turrbal and Jagera peoples, and thank them for their continued hospitality. I acknowledge and celebrate the continuation of a living culture that has a unique role in this region. I also acknowledge elders past and present, as well as our emerging leaders of tomorrow, and thank them for their wisdom and guidance as we walk in their footsteps. Hi, I'm Laura Lewis. I'm really glad to be here today. So my contact details are there if anyone wants to contact me. I provide them very willingly because I'm always happy to chat and speak. I believe open conversations are the only way to end stigma. I now do a lot of advocacy work in this arena, along with bullying in schools and autism. My mental illness has made family life difficult. It has upset my children. It has scared them and it has silenced them. I do have the privilege of a good clinical team supporting me and a great and patient husband and wonderful supportive parents. While I speak, I have prepared some slides quoting from a book by Melina Marchetta called, I hope you can see that, it's called Saving Francesca. I read this book in the early days of my mental illness, which was 9 years ago. And while it was painful, I found it a very powerful book. After I finished it, I carried it in my handbag for at least 6 months as it resonated so strongly with me. I started reading it again recently when I was approached to speak today. I couldn't get through a third of the book as it was still very raw and painful, which surprised me. The quotes that I have on the slides are from Francesca. She is the 15-year-old daughter of Mia. Her confusion and blame, or self-blame, that she experienced during her mother's mental breakdown are very painful and raw. So read them while I speak, or the slides can be emailed to you. I've given permission. Better yet, read the book. At my worst, I spent large chunks of time in a private psychiatric facility. During this time, my family rallied around my kids, who were then 6 and 8. They ensured their routine remained stable. They informed their school, who immediately placed my 6-year-old daughter in a program called Seasons for Growth, Children and Young People's Program, providing her with a loving, resilience style support group at school. My son, her older brother, is autistic, and whilst he missed me, he was happy with a stable routine. At my worst, and believe me, I was truly in the grips of severe depression, I truly thought my children deserved another mother, that I was not good enough for them. When I was not in hospital, I was demanding. It was beyond my control, but I somehow was aware my anxiety made me a difficult person to live with. We had to arrive at events an hour before they started because of my anxiety. We had to drive certain routes. I slept a lot and contributed little. I was always loving and mostly engaged with my children, but my children sometimes were very silent and sad when I was at my worst. I went through 8 years of darkness. During that time, along with hospital admissions where I received many cycles of ECT, I also, as an outpatient, attended day programs twice a week. A mental health nurse visited me weekly when I was home. I was regimented with my medication, never abusing it. Somehow, even at my sickest, I knew I had to practice that little bit of self-care. Even though I would rarely shower or change my clothes. I can't even tell you when the climb back to wellness began, as it was so subtle. One thing I will never forget while in discussion with my psychiatrist was asking him about my kids and how was this impacting them. In words that nearly broke me, he told me that kids usually think this would be their fault. It makes sense For their whole lives, my kids have been the centre of my universe. And then suddenly, I was barely present in their lives. Why wouldn't they think it was not about them? Did that motivate me? Maybe, but I can't say for certain. I know personally CBT was not helpful, but I really responded to ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. Learning that the very horrible moment I was in would not be forever was a really big breakthrough for me. I still can be gripped by very dark thoughts, but I have a resiliency now. I know I can say to myself, tomorrow will be different, and it usually is. I know I can recognise when I catastrophize or ruminate and what tools will help me. This wasn't something easily learned. I dutifully attended day programs for years. I encourage all here to watch episode 37 of 2018's SBS Insight on Anxiety. They have a very interesting discussion with both patients and clinicians. It troubled me that one psychologist could dismiss 3 patients' experience and the work of another psychologist, saying words like, under the Better Access to Mental Health Care Medicare initiative, which provides patients with up to 10 rebatable sessions, they can only use CBT, not ACT, and then justifying it with words like robust body of treatment. She said they need to be science-based practitioners. Another psychologist talks about not just the need for flexibility in their patients, but flexibility in the practitioners. So I challenge you to consider what is best for your patient. I did not like CBT because I don't like being told what is wrong with me or how to fix myself. Of course, there are many areas that can be improved upon, but I am oppositional and therefore ACT is a better program for me. So while the clinicians here I know are treating children and youth, please be aware that different people respond to different treatments, or a mix of them as well. My kids are now 17 and 15, and I'm very open with them about my mental health. I have explained to them that never for 1 minute was it their fault, and I continue to reassure them, as I do relapse sometimes, that never, however low the point is. That doesn't make sense, but anyway. I have again become their very loving mother. I am also very different now too. I am fierce. I have thrown myself into advocating for autistic and disabled people. I am working hard on trying to bring systemic change to the approach schools use when dealing with bullying, and I am very open in every way about my mental illness. One thing I'm adding, which I didn't actually write about, but it was my daughter who has been a recipient of Young Carer funding in the past. So I've known Fleur for quite a few years, and my daughter has received very necessary and important funding for her, which has given her the opportunity to stand independently aside from me, her mother with mental illness, and her brother who is autistic. So those opportunities were funding for music lessons and sport and some tutoring as well. My daughter is painfully shy and did not want to participate in any group activities that was offered, but I know many other young carers really do enjoy them. I still have a mental illness. I'm much more in tune with my mental temperature now though. At the beginning of this year, I admitted myself back into the same psychiatric facility for 11 days. I was burnt out and recognised the symptoms of a beginning downward spiral. During that stay, I had to obtain my psychiatrist's permission to leave for a day to attend my graduation ceremony. I am also returning tomorrow to the same private psychiatric facility for some continued intervention and maybe a couple of weeks admission. I've learned intervention is much kinder than waiting for the downward spiral to required and needed admission. It is possible with a good clinical team behind you to maintain stability. And this is something I know I am fortunate to have, and that many without private health cover don't receive. If I personally could be responsible for changing three things, they would be: one, that media would not sensationalise when writing about mental illness. I'll give an example. ABC on Facebook a few weeks ago wrote a story about ECT which was incredibly inaccurate, and they used a shocking image of Jack Nicholson from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest receiving barbaric shock treatment without any kind of an anaesthetic. And I actually contacted them and told them that is not what mental illness looks like, and they removed the image. And I gave them a photo of myself with my beautiful, loving family to prove that this is what mental illness looks like. I'd like them to report accurate suicide statistics, not individual deaths or details, but rather the statistics as they are higher than what people know and understand. And there is not enough safe talk about suicide out in the general arena. 2, that our leaders in politics, the corporate world, sport and fame openly discuss their mental battles. Some of them would have them because 1 in 4 people are impacted by mental illness during their life. If our leaders and role models were open about their mental illness, that would help remove the stigma. My current mental health nurse cautioned me about being open and actually begged me not to be open. And I said no. Denying my mental illness is denying a large part of who I am, and failing to acknowledge the valiant battle I'm so proud to have won, or mostly continue to fight. And 3, that our government ensured every person received the same care I do. Investing in improving a person's mental health and offering interventions will be an investment in our health system. It will save lives, it will keep families from disintegrating, it could minimise our drug problem, and it will help our children. So some of my successes and how I thrive with mental illness. Last year I started a business for my son. It is a huge success. I manage it now. He's still in year 12, and it's attracted international media. Last year I delivered a speech at a national autism conference. I delivered a speech at a conference on research around mental health. Last year I delivered a 1-minute pitch at TEDx Brisbane. Last year I flew to Canberra to listen to my federal member talk about the work I was doing in my community. Last year I completed a 6-month parent leadership course, and I'm still just an unpaid advocate, unfortunately. So right now I'm actually also in the midst of starting my own business. I still attend every event I can to allow myself the opportunity to advocate and make influential connections. I write to journalists when they sensationalise mental illness or misrepresent autism. My conduct during these communications, whether written or in person, is informative, assertive, polite, and with an element of kindness. Not every person's story will be like mine. If we can, as a collective, ask that my 3 call to actions are adopted, then more people could be helped and more people could be correctly informed. Mental illness doesn't just affect the parent, it can have a lasting, traumatic impact on their children too. My kids went through this as much as I did. How can clinicians, family members, friends and schools help children of parents with mental illness? Always remember that no matter the age of the child, they do have a level of self-determination, which will mean that unless they are included in the conversation, they will blame themselves. Children are very resilient. I have many beautiful photos of my children that were taken while I was in hospital, and they were with either my husband, who is their father, or my parents, and they were happy. Children need to be informed. Being honest and keeping the conversation to an age-appropriate level it also involves them and informs them, and this will remove any doubt and guilt they may be feeling. Involve them in decisions around their care. How often do you want to see your mum or dad if they are in hospital or away from them? Do you want to make them a card? Is it nicer to go to a park rather than visit in a hospital? Do they want to read, their parent to read to them at night or talk every day before school? These are very small things, but if you ask your child what they want, it gives them an element of control back in their lives. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.